folks, my guest today is Mr. Neeraj Jain. He's country head of an international non-profit working on improving global health called PATH. What drew me to Neeraj was his infectious energy, his high voltage charm, and commitment to the work that he does for global health. Neeraj is a doting father to his two school-going boys, a committed husband to his equally talented wife, who is working for an equitable society for the special needs children. Before we welcome Neeraj, guys, if you like the interview, please be sure to press the like button and subscribe to it so that you get regular updates on the channel. A very warm welcome to Life Begins at 40, Neeraj.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me, Sanjay.
You're a pass out from the famous modern school Barakhamba and then straight on to your postgrad to Delhi University and wham into leadership roles. So how did a young lad manage to do that?
Well, it wasn't as simple and straightforward as that. There was a long journey before I got to where I am today. I have actually, after I finished school, I did my graduation in Hong Kong from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And I actually got to my postgrad at the Delhi University only much later in life. But in between, there were many jobs, right from campus recruitment when I finished my graduation to multiple different roles, which got me here where I am today. And lots of twists and turns, I can tell you, from private sector to development to retail. I mean, I've been kind of all over the place.
So what made you then continue this journey with the development sector after the private sector? What has made you stick here and stay?
So I moved into the development sector fairly late in life. It was about 7-8 years ago, and it was a conscious choice to move into the sector. I think it's one of those, you've chased money and bottom line for a long time, and then you suddenly decide that there's something wrong with this picture, and you start thinking of how you could change it. I got my lucky break. I managed to get into the development sector because I came purely from a private sector background. I'd studied finance and international marketing, so not really, somebody who had the education there. But that whole idea of can I use my skills to actually have impact on people? Just looking at the inequities around the world, it was like, can I actually use it? It was one of those questions I had was, I'm not sure if I'll be successful, but it's worth giving it a shot. And that's how I made it to this sector. And it's been an interesting journey. I've failed many a times. I've also succeeded sometimes, and it's been great fun.
What are the intrinsic qualities you feel that have guided you through the last few years in your role here as country director?
I think the one thing that kind of drives me, and the only reason I'm actually here, is how do I have, or what part of my work could have some impact on human lives, and if, that's what sort of keeps me driven. That's what makes me either successful or a failure. But that one single goal of impact keeps me driven. It's also, when you see that impact on the ground, and when you see those people who have actually benefited, whether it's in the form of a new vaccine, and I'm only talking about a lot of vaccines nowadays because of COVID, or it's in the form of clean water or sanitation, or it's in the form of tuberculosis and how you're going to manage that. It just, every time I meet those people who are affected and who are able to benefit, that's what brings me back. It's very, at times it's very disappointing because you work very hard and you don't really achieve as you want, but it's those small miracles that keep you going.
So what do you think is the role of public health in driving the development of a country and its economic growth?
So I think public health has a huge part to play because the inequity in health is so large. The haves and the have-nots. I mean, if I just look at myself, I grew up in a pretty in an environment where I never had to go to a public health facility. I always had access to private healthcare, good quality doctors, and we could always afford it. But if you actually go and see the public health system and people who can't afford it, there's a huge amount of inequity. So, and if we are able to get or manage that inequity, that's when you see impact at scale, impact where you're actually moving the country forward. You're moving the nation forward, you're moving the world forward. So inequity is a large part which the public health system can actually address. So I think it plays a massive part. So Parth believes that health equity will move generations ahead. As if the inequities continue, we will always have a divided society. We will always have health which is split. Now, COVID is an interesting example where all these barriers of the rich and the poor are breaking down. We've had Amitabh Bachchan have COVID, and we have poor people getting COVID. And these walls that we've created, our boundaries are gone. So Parth believes that these boundaries shouldn't exist. Quality access to quality healthcare must be provided to everybody in the world, and that is when humanity will move forward. So that's what Parth does, and it's absolutely amazing to see some of the effects of some of the work that we do.
Wonderful. So, what the pandemic and keeping yourself and your team morale high, how did you manage that in the last few months?
That's a tough question, because on one side you're saying, while we have the pandemic, we must continue our work because we are the frontline public health warriors. So, this is our war. We have talked about pandemics all this while, and we need to be out there. On the other side, you're always worried that, I hope our teams are safe. I hope they're well protected, etc. So I think one thing that we followed, or I followed, was transparency, where you really talk to the teams. They understand the risk. They also understand the responsibility, and you ensure that they are provided with whatever they need to manage the risk or mitigate the risk, but also being very clearly aware of what the responsibility is as a public health organization, as an individual working in the public health space. So it's actually fantastic to see. And I know everybody talks about our frontline workers and how we need to compliment them, but I think it's much more than that. It takes a lot of guts to tell your family that I'm going to go out there and work, despite the fact that I've been told to stay at home, essentially. So there was a time when the pandemic just hit and the government was starting to screen people coming in from overseas. And the Mumbai municipality was at the front of it for Mumbai. And they actually reached out to us and said, and a lot of their teams had stopped coming to work. Even at the airport, people were just not, there was so much fear that people weren't coming in. And they reached out to us and they said, can you actually support us? So we have a big team in Maharashtra. And we actually, especially the team that was in Mumbai, because traveling was impossible almost. The team in Mumbai actually went to the airport, helped with the line listing, helped with the active case surveillance and active case finding, finding out who these individuals were who had probably been affected, who they had traveled with, how do you contact them. So right at the front line. And I can tell you, I used to really worry. I mean, I had many sleepless nights because it was all about the safety of the team. But, you talk to the team and they were so happy and excited. They were all taking precautions. We provided them with whatever they needed to be careful. But they were out there. I was actually, when I found out that 5 of our people were sitting in Mumbai airport, I was a little taken aback because they hadn't actually asked anybody before they did that. But I was very, very impressed. And I think, and it's not only there, Lucknow, we were in the war room with the government, supporting them with whatever they needed. We were in the war room in about 9 states, including in Kashmir, Srinagar. We were in Maharashtra, of course, as I mentioned. So we were all over the place. Our teams were all over the place. Couldn't travel, but wherever they were working. So we have worked through the pandemic, I can tell you that.
Beautiful. What warriors, indeed. So, what is the biggest risk that you have taken, that Mr. Neeraj Jain has taken as a human?
Um, uh, Specifically during COVID, I think the biggest risk I've taken is to allow my teams to be out there. I
Yeah.
think that to me was the biggest risk that was taken. It's still a live risk because we have about 400 people in India, and each one of them is working, and a lot of them are out there. And now the travel is open, so they're also traveling, which actually increases the risk, as we all know. So that's been the biggest risk. I think from a personal perspective, when I moved from the private sector to the development sector, that was a huge risk because I was doing well in the private sector. I had a good job. I had a great salary and all of that. And, this bug bit me and I said, no, I need to do something about impact. And I moved. And it was tough finding a job. Nobody wanted to recruit me. I remember the first job interview I went for, they said, have you ever worked with government? Have you ever, partnered with government? And I said, no, I haven't. And I didn't get the job. So I really had to try and convince them that, I haven't, but, give me a chance. Let me try and do that. So I think that's the risk. I've been really, really lucky. Of course, I also sometimes say that the recruiters made a mistake and they put me in the job, but I've been extremely lucky. I've been blessed to be where I am today.
So, but what I would next like to ask you is, what is the difference you see in the young leaders of today from our time, so to say?
Oh, I am completely blown away, frankly. When I meet these young kids just out of university or even the interns, they are so driven. They are so clear-headed. I mean, I remember when I went for my first job, it was only about what's my salary, versus the next guy in the room and how much money I'm going to make and how am I going to get this great job with one of the big banks, or am I going to go to consulting, or am I going to go to the Coca-Cola and the Unilevers of the world. That was it. That's when you had arrived in life. These kids are driven. They know what they want. They are willing to take chances around that. They are definitely not, very, very different from us. They're also very clear-headed. I don't think I still know what I want to do, actually. I'm still thinking that maybe at some point I might have a change of career. But these kids know where they're going. When they make a change, it's not based on the job that they got, but it's based on their own strategic thought process of where they're going, where they want to be in 10 years or 20 years. So I'm totally impressed. I feel, I wish I was 20 again.
This brings me to our next question. How are you helping these young, driven, clear-headed to be leaders? How are you helping them become the leaders of tomorrow?
I think they help me more than I help them. So, when I interact with them, I just get inspired. I think the only thing that we, really let them know what didn't work. What hasn't worked is important, so that they're able to sort of see through that, or what may not work. So that nudge possibly. But apart from that, I don't think they need any help. And I can tell you, our future is pretty bright. We have a whole lot of leaders under development. Our education system, I think, has also pushed in that direction. Where it's, I remember there was a time when you came out of an IIM or a FMS and you went straight into either consulting if you were really smart, or you went into an FMCG, large FMCG organization, or a Tata. And got a corporate job. That's not reality today. We get a lot of people in our organization. We get a lot of smart young people wanting to come in only because they're interested in social impact. So it's great to see the young leaders of today.
This is inspiring. So where do you see the development sector progressing?
I think at some level the development sector needs to merge with the private sector, or whatever you want to call it. They shouldn't be a separate development sector, because there was a time when you came out of social training or whatever, and you went into the development sector, social work or whatever, or you came out of a finance, marketing structure and went into the private sector. That world has changed. Now you are seeing these hybrid individuals who are doing the private stuff while doing the social. So if I'm able to, I'd like to see a world where there is no separate development sector. Everybody is in development while they continue to do the commercial work that we do. So I would like to see it disintegrate. I would like to see it vanish. I also think that the government, across the world, governments are doing more of their job. And if the governments deliver, then you don't really need a development sector, right? You may need it to handhold, you may need it for catalysm, but you don't really need a separate development sector. So I'm hoping that before I die, I see the development sector just shut down.
So the second round of this interview is going to be a quick fire round. If you could switch places, who would that be with?
Arvind Kejriwal probably. I think that's my next calling probably, because I believe that if you complain too much about something, you should just go in there and maybe try and fix things yourself. So maybe, yeah.
And your go-to relaxation thing to chill in life?
I'm a complete movie buff. I watch everything, and I'm very forgiving. So I watch a lot of trash. And I still come back. Yeah, it was fun, I spent 3 hours and I watched some trash. So yeah, it's movies all the way. English, Hindi, Tamil. I can go for any language: Japanese, Iranian, anything. But I watch movies.
Wonderful. Okay. And a book that you are currently reading?
So I'm reading a very nice book called Lean Impact. It's a book by Anne Chung. And I think it's available on Amazon, and it's all about innovation, which is looking at frugal innovation, but in a much more scientific way. So really, really nice book.
Interesting. So a motorbike person or a car person?
Motorbike. I have a Thunderbird 500cc Enfield, and I love it. Of course, I don't get to ride it as much as I would like to, but yes, that's what I love.
Okay, and do your children share this passion of motorbikes with you?
I've got a very interesting 2 boys. I've got my elder one who sits behind me on the bike and he says, "Papa, please, dheere chalao." And then I have my younger one who sticks his head out and says, "Papa, can you go a little faster?" So I got a mixed bag there. We'll see how that evolves as they grow up. They're 15 and 13, so still some time to see.
So, which song would you sing at a karaoke night?
I think the only one where I sound halfway okay and acceptable and people don't walk out of a bar would be Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton.
Yes.
I probably mastered the art of doing that on karaoke.
And what makes you laugh the most?
Actually, anything. I laugh all the time. In fact, people sometimes find it intimidating that I laugh. I have a special liking to some sort of dark humor. Or humor which is targeted at oneself. So that probably sort of tickles me the most.
Beautiful. That's probably what makes you so resilient. And your biggest fear, Neeraj?
So the biggest fear for me is the children getting hurt, either physically or emotionally. That troubles me. That sometimes keeps me awake, especially during the lockdown. I've been very worried about them. And fortunately, they are probably more resilient than I am because they've held strong and they're slowly coming out of it. I mean, my elder one's playing a cricket match as we speak right now, so I'm glad to see that.
So, are you a tea or a coffee person?
Only coffee, no tea.
Only coffee.
Tea only when you're up in the hills and it's really cold, then maybe a cup of tea, but otherwise coffee.
Okay, and your favorite movie character?
So I'm going to take the liberty of giving you 2. One is Munna from Munna Bhai, because I think he is so simple and so stupid and so clear-headed and so ethical and all of that. And the other is Al Pacino from The Godfather, Michael Corleone. So the 2 who sort of, I think they influenced me also a little bit.
3 things that you're passionate about.
So you already know I love movies. I'm very, very passionate about my movies. I pretty much watch one a day. I love travel, so I'm out there all the time, and I can travel at 2 minutes' notice. And finally, I think what I've really become passionate about is impact. I've seen it at close quarters. I've seen what you could do and what you can achieve, and how many lives you could actually touch. And I'm really blessed to be able to do that work, and it really sort of drives me.
I'm going to come back to travel. What is it about travel that you're so is it adventurous travel or any form of travel, and why is so appealing? I mean, why does it appeal?
I think I'm essentially a nomad, reincarnate of a nomad. For me, travel is just going out and finding out about the world and really sucking in everything that you can. So I've traveled to 44 countries
Wow.
in my life. I've been backpacking in Cuba. I've been all over the place. So for me, travel is where all my money goes. So I don't have much saving, but that to me is my soul. Yeah, that's what keeps me going.
Your go-to song, Neeraj?
You'll probably find out how old I am when I tell you this, but it's Pink Floyd, "Comfortably Numb."
Wonderful. And what rejuvenates you?
Lots of things actually, but the one thing that, especially in the last few years, has really had a big impact on me is the kids. And when I see my children and our children, and I see them doing well, both in terms of school, in terms of their sports, etc., it really rejuvenates me. And travel. So, and now more and more traveling with the children. So and my wife. So the four of us traveling together really rejuvenates.
The one thing that you like to potter around and help in the house with?
In general, I'm one of those. I'm a little obsessive about throwing things away. So whenever spring cleaning is required, I'm called in, and I'm very not. I'm not emotional about throwing things away. So I believe anything that you haven't used for a year should leave the house. So my wife Amita just calls me and she says, "Go ahead, clean up," and I'm happy to do that.
So one thing that you still aspire to do?
So for the last few decades, actually, I've been wanting to dive. Scuba, and I've done it, but I am not certified yet, and I haven't gone into the deep sea. I've done up to 30 meters, so that's something I really want to. And interestingly, I was going to do that in first week of April this year. I was going to the Andamans, tickets booked, hotel booked, everything done, and COVID came along. So not yet. I think the time will come.
Yes.
But I'd like to do that.
Wish you the best for that. So so this is part A and part B. The last question: two things that no one knows about Neeraj, and two things that you would like to tell aspiring leaders.
When I say no one, I'm presuming some people would know, but I think in general people don't know that I'm a very nervous public speaker. So as we are speaking right now, I'm quite nervous. And interestingly, my job, I'm public speaking pretty much every second day. So it's a tough one, but I spend a lot of time. So I always spend a lot of time preparing because I think I'm pretty nervous about speaking. And the second thing that a lot of people don't realize is, for me, family always comes first. They think that I'm driven, my work, blah blah blah, but actually I would quit this job and go home if my family ever needed me, and I think that's for me, it is about the family, and the work is incidental, not the other.
And two things that you would like to leave as a thought with aspiring leaders. And
so I think the one thing that I would like to one of them is that don't ever make a commitment and not follow it through. I think that's something that I keep telling my kids. I tell whoever I meet that, either don't make a commitment, but if you do, then follow it through. Because that's going to create your credibility as you move forward. So that's an important one. Or don't make the commitment. That's fine. You could always say no. That's one. The other thing is, it's okay to change your mind. It's all right. You could have decided to do something, and then thought, maybe I don't want to do this. I'm going to change my mind. And it's absolutely fine. And I keep, again, telling my kids, it's fine to change your mind, but don't fail on your commitment. So you can't make a commitment and then change your mind. Don't combine the two, right? But, it's all right. You could decide after studying engineering that, listen, I don't want to be an engineer or whatever that might be. But be okay. Be okay with changes. Be okay with changing your mind. Don't get stuck with a certain direction, because a lot of times that causes a lot of pain in the long run.
Neeraj, I am again so very grateful that you came on Life Begins at 40. Thank you so much for that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Trust me, I enjoyed it as much. I was nervous, but now once we started, the nervousness just went out. And it was great.
I think it's you who has this aura and this cool thing about you, because you put me at ease too. So thank you so much for that, and my warmest appreciation and deepest regard for all the work that you are doing in the public health space. Thank you.
Thank you.